Good morning, everyone. My name is Jofre. I'm actually moderating this session. The subject is Disruptive Trends Transforming Urban Mobility. So just first of all, let you know a little bit about logistics. So the first is you may, during the session, introduce questions electronically. You have an app you may install in your mobile if you have didn't before. The name is Ask and Vote. So we are invited to submit us questions. So we'll collect them, and at the end we'll may pass through the speakers. So please remind that. So from the session itself, I'll do a short introduction, so I'll give the floor to each one of the panelists, and then finally we'll open for questions to the audience, and finally a little wrap up at the end. So let me introduce right now the different speakers. First of all, myself. I'm a professor at the Technical University of Catalonia here in Barcelona, and also mainly that's the reason for being here today. I'm the academic director of the CARNET. CARNET is a public-private consortium on mobility, joining companies, academy, and institution around the mobility here around Barcelona in the large sense, around meaning through all the European dimensions. So from that into the session we have today, we are all convinced that mobility would be one of the big drivers for plenty of aspects at economic, industrial, and social, and especially for cities, that would be certainly one of the major drivers. So here we have a set of panelists that I'm convinced that may give a really very complementary approach. So let me introduce them in the same order they will talk. So first of all, we have Mr. Ignasi Vilajosana. He's the CEO and co-founder of Worldsensing, a Barcelona-based IoT pioneer and operational intelligence provider. Thank you for being here. So the second one would be coming from a little bit further. His name is Chris Atkins. He's actually Vice President for Digital Government Transformation of SAP, and he comes from the States. So he serves as Vice President for Digital Government Transformation at SAP Public Sector, and he guides SAP efforts to provide through leadership in the area of digital government and related areas. So on my right, the third speaker comes from London. He's the Vice President for Enterprise Partnerships for Mastercard. His expertise in digitizing city transit is the founded open 10 years at Transport for London, now leading this Mastercard area. So he combines both public and private experience. And finally, Mr. Chris Atkins, Mr. Peter Marland. He's the mayor of Milton Keynes Council in United Kingdom. So that's really exceptional also having him just bringing to this presentation the feeling, the pulsing of the cities. Milton Keynes is a real dynamic city, and he has been interested in the area of smart cities for a certain time that combines with this city experience. So thank you all of you for being here, for your complementary experience. And so let's start with Mr. Ignasi Vilajosana. Please, floor is.
Hello, Good morning. I lost my voice during last days, so this means I was selling a lot. And I will try today to talk about a new concept that we are introducing, which is the operational intelligence. And we will try to show you how we are helping cities to make their mobility management more responsive. And I think that the responsive term is very important in the days we are living. No? And during these days, if you have seen more of these talks, probably you have heard this sentence for many times, no? And essentially, cities are becoming centers of global economic development. No? We are in the knowledge economy; they are the centers of the real development. But they are facing, and their leaders need to overcome very strong and pressing challenges. No? And the main driver of their growth is attraction of talent and investment, and that's key in the knowledge economy. And they need to do that, facilitate the speed of interactions. It is not the same interactions that happen in a mile in New York than in another very spread area somewhere. And of course, given our political and geopolitical context, take into account the actual geopolitics. And besides all of that, no, and the leaders in our cities, what they need is to manage a very complex ecosystem. No? And as you know, the ones that are in the public sector, no, they need to work with the legacy systems. No? A city is a brownfield. No? There are many all instrumentation, all types of systems already deployed for a while. Very complex stakeholders ecosystem, departments, silos, political parties involved, providers, etc. And of course, the economics, no? That it's the reality of the economics of cities, what it is, no? And then another very important, that is in this new era of talent attraction and the need to attract talent, citizens are every day becoming more and more. They require more attention. They want to be listened and they want to be participating in the political decisions in the city. Then. And another one, which is happening, it's a reality, and this is this intermediation of the new mobility services, Uber, Cabify, the biking systems. We cannot stop them. So that's the real challenges that cities face. Then how the authorities are reacting in front of this context, no? So we have seen, I'm not sure what has happened. Okay, sorry. So we have seen many cities that they keep on talking about this concept, and they have done nothing. We saw others that they have changed their internal organizations and they organize with different specific departments like a smart city departments and try to address the challenges from there. There are many that have implemented some pilots of some digital technology. They adopted this technology to try to cover the digitization of a silo, and few, they are focusing on building PPP models and involve the private sector to finance real use cases that provide a real outcome, a real value to cities. And a minority understood that involving citizens will make their cities smarter. No? And it's about citizens, having our citizens in the center of our decisions, because they are the pool of talent that we need to make them our economy. Then. And the leaders, no, and having working with some of the leaders, no, they understood very quickly that the citizens' feedback is key in their decisions, and they involve their opinion, their messages in their decision-making process through systems of insight that aggregate information. They get the insights and make them actionable in their decision-making process. No, with that, they increase efficiency. They improve their communication channels and establish direct communication channels with the citizens, and overall they open their cities to innovation from third parties. No? We have seen over the last few years two main steps. 1 and 2 is what has happened mainly. So we have seen digitization and monitoring of some silos as the key drivers of the smart city adoption. But today, what we see is that the way to go is to go to a prediction, acting, and engaging with citizens. That's what we did in the city of Bogota in Colombia, 11 million inhabitants. We managed to build our mobility solution, which is a solution that connects to a multiplicity of subsystems in the city, aggregates all the information in real time, and we support the decision-making process for cities so they can react in a more efficient way. the answer and the KPI that we managed to achieve is a reduction on the time of response of the police in front of a traffic incident from 12 minutes to 8 minutes, which is saving life. Then the citizen engagement, it has proved that if we empower citizens to collaborate, to tell us what's going on, if they saw an incident, like Waze is doing, like many other companies are doing. So we will get a lot of information from them, but more importantly, if when we solve this issue, I have a hole in front of my house and every day when I drive my car, I hit the hole and I complain. When you solve it, you tell me. And then this is a very strong tool to improve our governance. Then, just to finish, and I would like to finish with a question, and with this context, does smartness come from increased control from cities, or does it come from improving responsiveness and engaging citizens? Thank you very much.
Okay, let's move to our next speaker, Mr. Chris Atkins, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a very simple message and a key takeaway for you this morning as we talk about urban mobility, all the trends that are driving change for our citizens. I put this picture in my first slide, and this shows a young woman in a city on a mobile device. We could imagine her accessing mobility services, traffic services, and I like to call her Sally, but I would encourage all of us to put Sally at the center of our thinking. Citizens, it was mentioned in the previous presentations, really thinking about engaging citizens. It's easy to think about technology. Most of us here are technology geeks or nerds. We love technology. It's why we're here. But technology is all about delivering better services for citizens. And Sally probably doesn't really care as much about technology. She cares about getting around, getting from place to place, living her life, having a good quality of life. And so I think it's easy to lose sight that we need to put citizens first. These are all the trends that are coming at Sally from a mobility perspective, trends that we are all monitoring together and talking about at conferences like this. You have things like mobility as a service. This is the very simple concept that Sally wants to go from point A to point B. She doesn't necessarily care how the city has broken down those silos in terms of transportation services, whether it's a taxi or an Uber or taking the train. Or some other type of transportation. But it's can we get Sally from point A to point B, and can we use technology to do that? That's being done now. It will continue to be done in the future. Autonomous vehicles, the picture on the top right, we're going to hear a lot more about autonomous vehicles from some of the other presenters today. But how can we harness the power and the new models that are presented as a result of autonomous vehicles to benefit Sally? It's all about Sally. Bottom left, the sharing economy. How can we harness and leverage the power of the sharing economy to benefit Sally, particularly in concert with autonomous vehicles? We're going to have autonomous vehicles that aren't staying put very, very often in the future because they're going to be constantly put to use to get Sally and her friends from point A to point B. And then on the bottom right, we hear terms like blockchain, machine learning, artificial intelligence. These are all great. We're all trying to find ways to leverage these new innovation accelerators. But to citizens like Sally, they're not directly relevant to her unless we're using these types of technologies and innovations to improve her experience and her quality of life as a citizen. We can and will use these types of technologies and innovations to develop new business models in mobility and to improve the existing efficiency and effectiveness of our existing business processes. But again, we always have to remember when we talk about these technologies and these innovation accelerators that it's all about Sally. So how do we know what Sally wants? How do we know how to design services, mobility services, that Sally wants and needs and that she can use in her daily life? And I would submit to you that we use a data-driven approach to do that. And cities right now and members of the private sector in cities have the data that they need to research the question and to provide the insights that we need to create those new business models. But we have to do it by using a data-driven approach. We have lots of data on lots of different channels today. Trains, metros, taxis. We could partner with companies like Uber or Lyft to get data from them to really determine how are we going to get Sally from point A to point B. And then bottom left, that's when we, as government, we can start to analyze the data. And of course, at SAP, we can work with you to do that, no doubt. But it's about figuring out how to provide her different options, right? And maybe even to nudge her in different directions with the choices that she can make to get from point A to point B. And it's really all about the data and the citizen-centric approach to analyzing that data and disrupting the business models. But we're going to face a couple of different barriers as we move into this new world of mobility. The first is data sharing. And there's going to be 3 different areas of data sharing that we're going to have to confront. The first is internal data sharing in the public sector. As was mentioned in the previous presentation, government is typically broken down into silos. That data exists in different systems across different agencies, different ministries, and we have to create a better culture of data sharing in government, in our cities, in order to enable the data-driven approach to providing better mobility services to Sally. SAP has worked with customers in the past, and they've leveraged our technology to do that, so it can be done, of course. But it's a culture change. It requires leadership. It requires a new way of doing things in government to break down those silos. And again, it's easier to break those silos down if you're focusing on Sally and not traditional lines of bureaucracy, different departments, et cetera. The other way is we've got to find new ways for the public sector and the private sector to share more data. Earlier this week, I heard a really innovative example. We hear all about open data. Open data has been talked about in the city context for a long time. But we're even seeing cities now start to not just provide open data, but provide data in a way that specifically helps businesses in their community succeed and helps them attract talent. I heard a great example of that earlier this week. One city in the United States is providing data to many members of the restaurant and food business in order for them to better target and advertise to their customers. And so that type of thing is going to have to happen, but we're going to have to find new ways to incentivize the private sector to share their data. And we're going to have to be really innovative when we do this. Last but not least, we've got to think about the economic disruption that's going to happen as we design these new business models and these new services. There's going to be change. What's good for Sally is not necessarily going to be good for other sectors of the economy that are providing services under existing business models. And so government has a chance to get ahead of that, to plan it, and to figure out how to transition those jobs into the new economy. So thank you for your time. It's been a great week, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Let's move for the third one. Please, Mr. Will Judge. Floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to attend this session and hear my remarks. I'm Will Judge. I am in the Global Enterprise Partnerships team at Mastercard. I'm based in London, but my role is a global one. I bring the best of Mastercard's capabilities and solutions to the specialist technology providers who serve the world cities in the areas of ticketing, fare payment, multimodal mobility, and so on and so forth. And it's a terrific opportunity here to come and share with you some of the trends that I'm observing in my work as I go around speaking with Mastercard teams, city authorities, and partner companies in the world's major cities on the question of how we can make the cities of today work better and how we can keep urban mobility moving forward and innovating in that space to make sure that citizens in the world's cities enjoy better and better experiences over the coming years. A few things I won't talk about. I won't talk much about the work that Mastercard has been doing in our core areas. We're absolutely focused on bringing the best of secure, seamless, and simple payments for journeys to the world. We have more than 100 projects globally where we have collaborated with partners to stand up solutions involving our contactless technologies and mobile technologies. That's 100 either delivered or in flight. Very happy to talk to you should you wish to know a little bit more about how we might be able to help your city on that front if you come to our stand, which is usefully close, just outside this area and slightly to the left. So please come and see us if you'd like to talk about that this afternoon. What I would like to do today is to talk about 3 disruptive trends that I'm observing. And the 3 are, you can see on this slide in front of you. Digital integration and intermediation. The picture you can see there is a well-known app that many of you must use called Citymapper. Started out in London. It's a great example of a digital-only player that is intermediating the traditional transport providers in multiple cities worldwide. And so we'll talk a little bit about the ramifications of that trend, who's active in it, and what it might mean for the city authorities and mayors around the world, and whether they should start thinking about this with a little more sharpness than they have done to date. The second trend I'm talking about is multi-leg journeys, route shortening. The picture you can see is a graphic I grabbed off the web pages of the East Bay Times in California, just east of San Francisco, reporting a story about where the city authorities there had started to use their funding in a radically different way, teaming up with Uber and Lyft to address some transport, operational and policy questions they had in some of their districts. It's a really good indicator of a fascinating story that we're seeing playing out as the rideshare industry takes shape. We'll talk a bit about that. And then the third trend I'm going to talk about is demand-side engagement, based on the hypothesis that we're now living in an age where the vast majority of consumers in cities have some kind of device through which the city can engage with them directly, which opens up a previously inaccessible range of strategies that's less around adding supply capacity or shape to the transport network, and much more about trying to affect the demand side of that industry by giving consumers opportunities and incentives to make decisions about their journeys that they might not otherwise have made. So we'll look at each of these in turn. So digital integration, intermediation. What do I mean by that? Well, previous speakers have affirmed, I'm sure it's patently obvious to you all, that every business is generating reams of data, and most cities have either for public policy and open data reasons, or because they have seen business cases and revenue stream opportunities, published great ranges of data about the transport operators who work in their city through open APIs. We work with a partner who has a transit solution embedded in their technology platforms that's integrated with more than 1,000 cities now, pulling in data about timetables for different types of transportation, route planning tools and applications that cities may have built, allowing consumers to figure out the most efficient and quickest way to get from A to B. And in many cases, even real-time service status, where the timetable has been disruptive, but the API is feeding data based on the actual location of buses, the actual arrival time of trains today. And that's fantastic. And people are building lots and lots of innovative new businesses about it. The trend is particularly developed for information. It is less evident for trip booking, ticketing, or payment. I think because those activities are ones where operators and cities are a little bit more cautious about opening up systems, bearing in mind they're processing payment credentials involving real flows of real money. But certainly in the realm of transport information, we are awash in a bathtub of data. So what's happening as a result of that? What I observe happening is that the users of those APIs, be they startups, be they the well-established big-name digital players, be they VC-funded new entrants in the transportation space, are progressively intermediating consumers of transport from the transport providers. The distance between a rider and the individual train company, bus company, taxi company that they are using to make a particular part of their journey is growing, because the consumer's attention is increasingly shifting to the digital actor that's enabling them to see the integrated totality of their trip. Now that's great. Consumers love that. It's a fantastic enhancement to the transport service they're getting. They can see all the information they need about their journey, the sequence of steps within it, the interchanges they're going to have to make in one place. Why wouldn't people bring their trust and attention to the digital actors that are providing that? But I do wonder if it flows up a little bit of a question for transport providers and for city authorities. A subset of this trend is the emergence of new businesses with a new business model, which is currently going under the label of mobility as a service. These are companies that are actually saying, I want to own the complete business relationship between a rider or I want to have total responsibility for delivering the journey as a whole to the rider. So that's not just about integrating information to present a digital picture of a journey. but actually taking the full commercial responsibility for delivering that journey, either as a standalone ride or as a bundle of services over time. And you don't have to go very far to hear people who are passionate advocates of the mobility as a service model and who are enthusiastically launching startups and businesses of this nature across the world. Notable one, WIM, which is a Finnish application launched in the West Midlands. It's going to be fascinating to see, West Midlands in the United Kingdom, fascinating to see how they get on and how they work with integrating with the local transport networks, but actually owning the commercial relationship with the customers for the complete responsibility for fulfilling that journey. I think the question in my mind that this subject raises is, to what extent do the cities want or feel any pressure to play in this space? Who actually will the person on the streets of your city think of when in the future they think, I need to find a digital provider to show me my end-to-end journey? Is it okay that they rely on that for a company like Citymapper or a big company like Here? The screenshot you can see here is Here's WeGo application, which they offer worldwide and will offer you integrated route choices with all sorts of drive, ride share, walk, metro, taxi. It does the complete integration for you, but nowhere there do I see the mayor or the transport authority of the city in which this journey is being planned. This is not a criticism of Here, by the way. We very great working relationship with Here, and their application is very, very capable. But I think it's a policy question that I would encourage city authorities and mayors to think about. Should their presence, their brand, their logo be there if this is actually going to be the digital interface for their transport network in the future? Question one. Number two, route shortening. So we collectively now live in a world where most consumers have these applications in their pockets on devices that make it so simple to plan and so simple to pay for a complex multi-leg trip as to be unimaginable 15 years ago. This is absolutely fantastic, and it's small wonder that consumers are rallying around this trend. But I think as anyone sort of thought it through a little bit, if you decrease complexity like this, the chances are you are going to increase the extent to which consumers will make mode changes. Their journeys will increasingly shift from single mode or bimodal journeys to multiple mode journeys, triple, quadruple, quintuple mode journeys, guided by the app, guided by the algorithm that underpowers it. So what we're likely to see is increasing fragment of trips, and they will use the mode or the form of transport that makes most sense for them. In the center of our cities, this is likely to be the big high-capacity transportation services that we're all familiar with, metro rail, tram, BRT. But at the fringes, customers are going to want to buy the service that takes them to the door. And that historically has not been buses. I suspect that one consequence of this trend will be a trend towards consumers shifting to rideshare and e-hail for the first mile and the last mile. I think you will see an erosion of the revenue base of buses, especially in the periphery of cities. And I suspect that some cities will need to respond by route shortening. And by route shortening, I mean only running the buses where there's sufficient aggregated volume to make it economic to do so. The TNCs, of course, the Grabs, the Lyfts, the Ubers of the world, are very happy to support this trend. There are some fascinating cases in the US where they are entering into truly collaborative public-private agreements where the city's transport funding is not being used to buy services directly, it's being used to subsidize rideshare rides. As a rider, this is a fantastic thing. I was just discussing with the panel beforehand that for many people, particularly people who feel vulnerable late at night, on a journey out of the city, this is the right answer for the last mile rather than walking home. Why wouldn't they do that? But I would encourage you all to think about the impacts on the core traditional transport operations. They are going to change shape, and I think cities are best advised to be ahead of that trend and proactive in trying to strike innovative deals with the new actors in this space that sustain the economic model of transport in the city and ideally make it better for everybody, rather than being short. And so my final trend is demand-side engagement. We're very pleased to have announced this year at Smart Cities Expo the results of a really interesting project we did with City Digital in Chicago over the summer, where we helped them really grapple with Chicago Transit Authority's biggest congestion headache, which was evening baseball games in Wrigley Stadium. The layout of Chicago is such that on a September night, when there's an evening game, starts at 7 p.m., the Red Line northbound is absolutely filled with two groups of people. Commuters going home on their regular journey home, and lots of enthusiastic baseball fans heading up to the stadium looking forward to a great evening. And the honest truth is that it happens so frequently, there's no business case to scale up the capacity of the red line. It's infrequent, it's predictable. And so we sat down with City Digital and with CTA, and we posited a different approach. We said, why couldn't we find some way of incentivizing people at the top of that demand peak to make a different choice? It was a very, very simple test. We said, could we somehow engage with them to just make a suggestion to say, you could go an hour earlier or an hour later? And that is a proposition that worked for both classes of people. If you're a commuter, if you have the flexibility to go earlier and work from home, why not? Or if you have the ability to work a little bit later, get something finished off and go later, why not? That works for many people, but not all. Equally, if you're a rider, I think you'd be hard-pressed to incentivize somebody going to the game to turn up an hour later. I'm very happy to accept that criticism. But you know, the proposition that says, why don't you go up to Wrigley Field early? There's a fantastic environment there with lots of things to do, experiences to enjoy, and many people responded to that. So we tried it out in Chicago with CTA's help. We engaged with a great partner of Mastercard's called Cineverse. They offer a really good, globally available SMS digital engagement program. We built a program of engagement with them and with CTA to sort of recruit riders on the red line ahead of time, and then in a very focused, tactical way, deliver SMS reminders or suggestions or incentives that they might do something different on game night. And the results were really interesting, very much more material shift in the number of participants who are traveling in that 5 to 6 p.m. peak than we anticipated before. It was double-digit percentages. So that's a really encouraging result. And we, Mastercard, are certainly going to do more work in this. We're going to try and bring some of our merchant partners in. We're going to try and use some of our analytics to see if we can target these messages much more precisely than we were able to do this summer. But I think the general message here is this, that as a city, the opportunity to use these mobile digital technologies to make very precisely targeted and timed asks of people in your city, whether they're residents or just visitors, could be a very powerful transport management and demand management strategy in the future. I would encourage you to look at it. One big question, of course, is how does this scale? This trial was done with just a few thousand people. But if we can find a model that works at mass scale, tens or hundreds of thousands of people, I think it may prove to be a compelling and really interesting new 21st century addition to the Transport Operations Manager's Toolkit. Those are my 3 disruptive trends. Thank you very much for listening to me. I look forward to taking your questions. And if you'd like to discuss anything that I've mentioned, the Mastercard booth is just out in the hall out there. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, then the final panelist would be Mr. Peter Marland.
Thank you. My name is Councillor Pete Marland. I'm the Mayor of Milton Keynes, which is Britain's most successful new town. For those that don't know, Milton Keynes is only 50 years old. It's our 50th birthday this year. In 1967, somebody very wise in central government decided to stick a pin in a map between Oxford and Cambridge, between London and Birmingham, and say that's the place that we want to place a new town. So Milton Keynes has grown and is an exemplar of rapid urbanization. We were less than 100,000 people in 1967, and we are touching 300,000 people today. And that is primarily because Milton Keynes is strategically located on some really important transport corridors in the UK, the M1 and the West Coast Main Line. It has always been a very important place in Milton Keynes' economy of how we move goods and services around. And actually, before Milton Keynes even existed, to the north of the city, which is the area that I represent, is Wolverton, which was the world's first railway town built in the 1830s. And to the south of the city is Bletchley Park, which is known as the home of computing. And that is because there was a quick direct train to London in the 1930s and 1940s that enabled people from Oxford and Cambridge to get to a central position, but also into London as the need arose, particularly during the Second World War. But we understand that as the fastest growing economy in the UK, places don't stand still. Milton Keynes is important today, but other places were important yesterday. I'm from the northwest of England. I grew up in Liverpool, and between 1900 and 1940, most of the reason for Liverpool existing ceased. A lot of my family are from Manchester, and in the same amount of time, those global world cities declined. We wanted to be in a position where we don't get to that decline before the next innovation and the next change in economic circumstances. So we undertook the MK Futures 2050 programme, which is around addressing the barriers to sustainable housing growth in particular, improving the lives of our citizens, and build leadership in urban innovation. The most important one of those is improving the lives of citizens, because nobody will vote for me at the end of the day if the city goes backwards. Nobody will vote for a leader that says tomorrow is going to be infinitesimally worse than yesterday. Leaders are always expected to be the beacon on the hill, the people who people look up to say tomorrow can be better, tomorrow will be better, how are we going to get there? If there's a role and a changing role for city leadership in the world, rather than about delivering services, rather than about saying this is what you'll have as a customer of those services, the role of a city leader is evolving to be something different, to be that beacon on the hill that says this is the world that can be. This is the world of how we can change, but this is the place that we want to go as a city. This is why we want Milton Keynes to even exist in the first place. And therefore, we are delivering some things. We are the first city in the world to have a fully electric, commercial electric bus service. We have the most electric car charging points in the UK, and we have a combined electric car showroom where every major automobile manufacturer, apart from Tesla, who is next door, offer a combined showroom for their electric vehicles. We have a city innovation ecosystem where all our sensors and data are put into an open data sharing platform, which is also being amended at the moment because we understand that whilst some data needs to be open and some data needs to be accessed by public authorities in particular, how we share across those public authorities, some of that data from the private sector and from the public sector has value. And that's why we are transforming into a two-layer data system, which is completely open and one which is proprietary and will be able to be accessed by funding mechanisms. Some people may recognise some of the major players that we have involved in Milton Keynes because it's important that as a city we aren't doing some of this, we are delivering it with our partners. But what does that mean for transport? To me, transport is a service, but it's also a function of something else. Nobody travels round for no purpose. Transport is a purpose, but we need to make sure that goods and services are mapped out more effectively. And that's why our City Motion Map is moving from all that data integration into how we can move goods and services around more quickly. Therefore, we have deployed at a city-wide scale these low-grade sensors that can pick up anything that moves. We will have around 14,000 of these on nearly 500 junctions with the ability to be able to connect into transport systems like our traffic light signals, because I think we've all been there. At some point we pull up at a junction and there's a red light and you think, why is this light red when there's nothing at the other four junctions? We will be able to link to those systems to mean that you have a green light. Or at 5 to 10 in the morning or 5 to 9 in the morning when a bus is full of people or a train is full of people, we're able to prioritise that public transport system above an individual in a car. But so far, so hygiene factor. Lots of cities are doing this. What's the difference? The difference is those sensors are all in themselves AI. They are all learning individually. And you can see from this graph, one is the predicted trend and one is the actual trend measured after the event. So what we are able to do with our Autodrive program, which is about autonomous vehicles, and with our pod program, which is around autonomous low-speed last-mile solutions for a low-density city centre, is allow autonomy and real-time AI to combine. But this throws up some very interesting challenges, and some challenges around that person-centric thing. Because Sally may know what she wants, but does she know what's good for her? We need to know whether somebody sitting in an autonomous vehicle will take being rerouted over sitting in a traffic jam. Because we've all done it. We've all been driving along a freeway or a motorway, and our satellite navigation system comes up and says, blockage, 3 junctions ahead. Accident, 3 junctions ahead. Turn off now and go a different route. And we say, I know best. I'm sure by the time I get to that junction, the traffic will have evened out and it will be fine. So I'm going to stay on the motorway. And then 20 minutes later, when you're sitting in a traffic jam, you think, why didn't I take that route off the motorway? But what would happen if that choice was taken out of your hands? What would happen if you're sitting in an autonomous pod and, as you can see, all these dots are individuals? The AI learning system will say, actually, it's 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Everybody's leaving work in Milton Keynes and coming out onto the streets. By taking the shortest A to B journey, it will take 10 minutes longer. So the AI system, an autonomous system, will take you round the back of Milton Keynes. It will get you there 2 minutes earlier. Will that person in that pod accept that they are getting there 2 minutes earlier? Or are we built as humans, and are our reward systems, things like how our release of endorphins, built to always think we know best? If we put an override button in autonomous systems, would people press it because they think they know better? So what we are doing as a city is being that exemplar on the hill. We are rolling out these AI systems. We are rolling out these small pods, which are for short courier services, for packages, for things like food. We are looking at autonomous drones. We are looking at major transport interchange. But what we want to be is a legislatively free area. We want to be a sandbox city, because I don't know which sensors will ultimately end up being Blu-ray and which sensors will ultimately end up being Betamax. We need to know, as a city, what we want to install. It will be down to the market to deliver some of that transport innovation. People didn't build canals or railways because cities told them to. Originally, people built canals and railways because there was an economic imperative to do so. So let's not remember, or let's not forget, that transport and mobility is a function of society. It is about growing the economy. It is about getting people and services from A to B. It doesn't exist in itself to exist. Some of those investments will be from the public sector, some from the private sector. But what we need to do, what Milton Keynes wants, is to be that innovation capital. So we know, as we develop new transport systems, what will emerge, how they will emerge, how individuals will react, how society will react. Because it all comes down, ultimately, to me, for the place to be better. What does it matter if we've got a functioning public transport system if half the people can't access it because they don't have access to digital technology, and 5% of my citizens can't read or do maths very well? Transport needs to be integrated into the wider functions of society and the wider functions of Milton Keynes and service delivery. And that's what we're aiming for, and that's what we should all aim for. Thank you very much.
So right now it's time for questions. In the I'm supposed to be fed with some questions, but in the meantime, is there any comment from someone of you that would like to compliment some of the previous thank you very much. Okay. The first question I have comes from Lluis Puerto. The question is, do we need Mastercard if blockchain becomes more mainstream for value change?
Would anyone else like to take that one? Mastercard and blockchain. So a rather bigger question than trends in mobility. I think the short answer is yes. I don't think it is necessarily the case that any single blockchain solution or blockchain-based solution. I'm sure you're all familiar with the big names, Bitcoin and Ethereum. These are hugely creative and innovative platforms. I think from our perspective, the evolution of blockchain-based payments is something we watch very, very carefully. We are investing in various companies acting in the space. We are extremely familiar with the fundamentals. We have our own blockchain platform. We offer that through APIs to anyone who would like to build blockchain-based solutions of their own on our platforms and make it accessible to users, be they businesses or consumers, through our network. It's a huge and fascinating subject that is changing the payments industry, but we are deeply involved within it. The only thought I would offer you is that I think the jury is still out as to whether Bitcoin and other blockchain-based cryptocurrencies are better thought of as consumer forms of payment so that people can transact with each other or transact with businesses, or whether they might actually be best thought of as an innovative 21st century digital asset class. And I'm sure if you research the subject, you can find advocates of both. I must say right now, I'm still not convinced that it is more straightforward for me to go and buy the goods and services I need when I'm traveling around London, or to make payments for my holiday using a Mastercard or my experimental Bitcoin or Ethereum wallets. And so I think the question is both regular card-based payments and blockchain-based payments deliver excellent security. But that's not the only thing you might need in a payment system. Things like ubiquity, interoperability, consumer understanding are all also equally important. And we as Mastercard are quite confident that we will be bringing our skills and our assets in those areas to consumers and businesses worldwide over the years to come, with or without blockchain.
Thank you. Next question comes from Peter. Wow. Please keep it. I got.
Should I busk?
No, the problem. The question was, could you explain a little bit more the two layers of you mentioned of the payments and who pays for? May I get back the?
We talk about MK Smart.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the second layer is newer.
Okay, sorry. The question is, can Peter explain more about the two-layer data system, free and open and paid for?
Yeah, so I think the holy grail of a lot of smart city and open and data platforms is around actually what commercial output there is going to be from it and the price of data, basically the value of that data and how that data is being sold as a commodity. I think there is a debate to be had, and this is where actually we are, and the MK Smart program is run out of the Open University with BT and Harway and ZTE. And what we're actually trying to do with MK Smart is build a model that actually has some sort of economic output and also a social output. So I don't think there is any very clear line between what is open data and what at the moment is proprietary data. Actually, I think there are some things like sharing data between the Health Service and Milton Keynes Council and the Department of Work and Pensions, who administer welfare benefits, and the hospital to try and understand how we can improve services to a small amount of people. But then actually, what does that mean if Mastercard put their data into the system? Because some of that will be able to benefit for the city, and there could be an agreement there, well, actually, the city can use it for free, but if individual startups are going to use it, then actually we'd like to charge those individual startups because they get commercial return out of it. So that's how the system will work, I think. It's talking on an individual basis to the people that put that data into that data hub about what they think can be of social benefit and what they think can be of commercial benefit.
Still with having Peter, there is a second question. How do you assess products and services suppliers for the smart city initiatives? How do you assess them? How do you?
Good question. Because obviously, like all local authorities and all intergovernmental organisations within the EU, we are subject to due procedures over a certain amount of money. But I think as a council, what we've tried to go down more is of the competitive dialogue process, more of understanding what outcomes we want to see as an organisation and as a city, and actually having an open conversation with any individual and any service that may want to come in and provide that service within the city, rather than going for a standard procurement and commissioning model, which is effectively we have £1 million to spend and these are the service level agreements, and 5% will be commissioned on social value, and 60% will be commissioned on quality, and 40% will be commissioned on this and that. Actually, what we are trying to go down is a more open dialogue and competitive tendering model, which are really based on outcomes that we'd like to see at the end of it. So rather than saying, for instance, that we'd like 100,000 people to have a flu jab every year, what is the point of having those flu jabs? It's about having a healthier society. So are we able to say, well, actually, we can block up more services in that rather than having an individual service package that we're going out to tender with?
No, could you recover for me? It's just ended. I didn't. Okay, so it was a last open question for everyone. The question being, how do you imagine? How do you imagine the incentivization of the private services just to configure the whole system? What could be the kind of incentives for the private sector to participate on a? Okay, so the proper question is how the panel envision incentivizing private companies, infrastructures and OEMs, etc., to share their, no, that was for the data, to share their data on an open platform. Wow, yeah.
Well, I think that risk sharing can be a great way to collaborate, meaning that at the end of the day there are many new technologies that need to be adopted by public sector, but this is also risky by the public sector. So if there's a policy to share data, share value, and share risk, I think you could balance a nice trade-off. So I think many companies will be willing to share and exchange their data in exchange of some compensations or some investments and some commitments.
Okay.
I would just add to that the classic model of, you may not have all the data you need to optimize your services for your citizens. You might partner with the private sector to make some of those capital investments for you, particularly centered around the Internet of Things, and then have agreements where the company is allowed to monetize that data to put to use in to generate new business models for them, to improve their processes as well. So that could be something that you throw into the mix too.
I think the only thing I'd mention on this point is that data doesn't come from nowhere. Data is generated by the actions of people, and the people whose actions create that data, oftentimes are the owners of that data. It's information about them. It's information about the things they've done in their lives. And so it's really important to think, very rigorously about the need to get their proper consents, to make sure those consents are managed and sustained and not assumed, to make sure that data is used in a way that respects the privacy, not just of people, but also of the businesses. And so all our work in Mastercard with trying to wring out insights from the rich data we see about people's transactions all the world is primarily governed by the need to ensure that the platform through which it is offered to entities and businesses that would value it is one that allows those consents and privacy requirements to be respected and maintained. And so I think that would be my suggestion for Cities of the Future. Anything you can do to facilitate getting, managing and maintaining consents in a way that citizens buy into, and I wholeheartedly support the remarks that my other panelists have said about citizen engagement and the need to make sure that these processes are done in a way that is consensual and collective. I think that would be that's an area where innovation might really spring up in the smart city space, a sort of an approach to consents between the public and private sector.
Okay, thank you. Peter?
So I think incentivization is all about benefit. So I was at an event similar last week, and they were getting into a very detailed discussion about the health service and how the health service needs to share data and what we need legislation changes. And somebody from the audience made a really good point of just saying, if you explain the benefit to the individual of sharing their data across all the services within Milton Keynes, they would just sign up. You don't need you don't need years of legislative change to have an individual conversation. So I think explaining the benefits, wherever those benefits may lie. So as a council, if a healthcare provider came to me and said, actually, if we share this data with you at this cost, we think you could save £1 million on your adult health and social care bill, why wouldn't we take the £800,000 saving? So it's explaining and being clear about the benefits, and often having individual conversations between organisations, often at face-to-face level, because I think somebody mentioned it, is technology is dumb and people are smart. And actually we lose within a lot of the technology driving some of these things, some of the basic human interactions that we should just be getting on with, which are things like, by sharing this data with me, I will be able to make sure that at 60, you won't need a really painful hip operation. Can I have your data, please? And they will say, yes. And then where do you sign? And so it's about explaining and being clear about upfront benefits.
Okay, thank you. That's the end. I have been asked to make a just last resume, just 3 messages. A, Sally. I mean, that's the first message, set in different ways, improving life of citizen, demand side citizenship engagement. But Sally, keep that in mind. I think that's more and more clear. Second one is data sensors, the importance, all the aspects we have been looking at, the data-driven approach, the economy of the model, the last comments we were given, and finally the importance of the intermediation, the mobility as a service, who is playing there, how we create complicity, how do we promote, how do we facilitate. Major mentioned the name City Moving Plan, things like that. So I think that the 3 pillars. So let's stop here and let's invite you to visit Milton Keynes, that we discover where it really is. So thank you for being here.